Welcome to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're taking a deep dive into Fyodor Dostoevsky's powerful, psychologically intense novella, Gentle Spirit, as translated by Constance Garnett.
It's an incredible piece of writing. Really gets under your skin.
It absolutely does. And this isn't just a story, is it? It's more like a first-person psychological autopsy.
That's a great way to put it. Our source material is the text itself, and it gives us this totally unfiltered look into the mind of a man dealing with the immediate, horrific aftermath of his young wife's suicide.
Right. He's trying to piece together not just the last few hours, but their whole complicated relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack the narrator's really intricate, often, self-deceptive journey to understand what happened, and also to maybe extract some of the profound insights Dostoevsky offers about human nature, pride, and, the tragic consequences of control.
Absolutely. It's rich with all of that.
Okay, so the story opens right in the thick of it. The tragedy has just happened. The narrator, he's a pawnbroker, is alone with his wife's body.
Yeah, you find him pacing. His mind is just a whirl, totally fragmented thoughts. But he's desperately trying to recount their entire relationship in order, as he puts it.
Which is fascinating in itself. What does Dostoevsky achieve by, plunging us straight into this raw stream of consciousness perspective right from the start?
Well, I think it immediately signals this isn't going to be a neat, tidy story. The narrator, he admits he's not a literary guy, but he feels this compulsion, this urgency to make sense of the horror. And that urgency gives us this raw, unfiltered view into his fragmented understanding.
He describes her initially as just a slender, fair little thing, almost indistinguishable from his other clients at the pawn shop.
Yes, and even there you sense this immediate, almost clinical detachment. It's quite chilling from the get-go.
But then despite that initial dismissal, he does start to notice she's different.
Right. She's always embarrassed, she's silent, and crucially, she never haggles. Completely unlike the others.
And he's struck by the stuff she brings in cheap earrings, a tracky locket, just really paltry items.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where he starts his psychological tests, isn't it? He scoffs at her last rag, this old hareskin jacket.
And her reaction is so telling. She flares up, those large blue and dreamy eyes blazing, and she just walks out. No word.
What's he trying to do there? What's the goal with that kind of, calculated cruelty?
Well, that calculated scoff, it isn't just a casual remark. It's really his first step into this psychological game he's playing. He wants to provoke her, test her resolve, see what she's made of.
And this defiance, he calls it her mutiny.
Exactly. And that's precisely what grabs his attention. He finds out later she'd been desperate, going to other pawnbrokers like Dobrinravas and Moser's, places that only dealt in gold.
Highlighting her desperation.
Totally. And he even accepts these worthless stones from her, which he wouldn't normally do. And then he twists the knife with that line, "I only do it for you, of course. Moser wouldn't take such a thing."
Oof. That clearly stings her. You see her pride even in poverty.
Right. So the question is, was he really just testing her character? Or was he maybe just indulging a cruel streak that he, tries to rationalize later?
He actually admits it, doesn't he? He says he wanted to test her because certain ideas with regard to her had suddenly come into my mind.
Mm-hmm. He sees she's soft-hearted and gentle, but he also figures she's this new movement type, someone with character, especially when she sarcastically throws back at him that he's revenging himself on the world.
And he quotes Mephistopheles to her. "I am part of that part of the whole that seeks to do ill, but does good."
Which, amazingly, seems to impress her.
Yeah.
It makes her curious about this strange man.
So that idea of testing her is really central. What does this whole test thing reveal about his own psychology, especially thinking about how he sees himself as a pawnbroker?
Yeah, precisely. Because if you connect the dots, this is our first real look into the narrator's massive self-delusion.
Yeah.
He doesn't see himself as just some mundane pawnbroker. No, he's this complex, brooding, almost, Byronic figure, an outcast with some grand misunderstood plan.
Right.
And he's proud that she seems intrigued. That interaction basically seals the deal for him. He decides to pursue her.
And then he gets the backstory from his servant, Lucaria, who he bribed.
Yeah, this tragic story. She's an orphan, living in virtual slavery with these disreputable aunts doing drudgery, scrubbing floors. And they're trying to marry her off to this awful, fat shopkeeper, 50 years old, treated his previous wives badly.
Which, of course, just feeds right into his narrative.
Perfectly.
So he swoops in, presenting himself as the deliverer.
Mm-hmm.
He proposes right there at the gate. stresses his straightforwardness, even admits his own flaws, not particularly talented, not particularly intelligent, rather a cheap egoist.
But he does it with this special sort of pride, like he's being brutally honest, but it's still self-serving.
He promises enough food, but no luxuries. He knows she's trapped, she has nowhere else to turn. His use of deliverer is so revealing.
It really is. And her hesitation, her serious face there at the gate, that's so key. He thinks she's just choosing between him and the awful grocer. But looking back, he wonders if maybe she was thinking of two evils, choose the worst.
Wow.
He admits later he didn't understand anything back then. Not until today, the day of the tragedy.
And his servant, Lucaria, even warns him, doesn't she? Only don't speak of that to her, she's proud.
Yes, and his internal reaction to that warning just lays bare his whole manipulative mindset. I like proud people, when one has no doubt of one's power over them.
Chilling. It sets the stage perfectly for his controlling system within the marriage.
Absolutely. He describes the wedding as à l'anglaise, very private, minimal fuss. Right away, it shows his desire for control, rejecting normal conventions.
She actually pushes back on that, forces him to deal with the aunts, give them money.
She does. He provides her a trousseau, clothes and things, but right from day one, he starts his system, his word, sternness.
He wants to be an enigma. He even admits he might be guilty of all this stupidity just for the sake of creating this mysterious persona.
And the system is immediate and ruthless. A strict daily budget, 1 ruble for food, a huge financial goal. 30,000 rubles in 3 years. Frugality above all.
But his justification is so twisted, he claims he wanted to instill breadth in her heart, make her understand his heroism in choosing to be a pawnbroker.
Exactly. He sees it as his revenge on society for casting him out. His own suffering is framed as this noble act she needs to recognize and ultimately admire.
His grand plan, as he puts it, is to suffer in silence, thinking, she will see for herself later on that it was heroic. She will prize me 10 times more and will abase herself in the dust.
Such grandiosity. But then comes that crucial, tragic admission. He forgot something or lost sight of it.
That forgetting, that's the fatal flaw in his whole elaborate setup.
It is. He lectures her about heroism, how young people lack tolerance. He tells her real heroism is laborious, obscure, without noise or flourish. A great deal of sacrifice and not one grain of glory.
Trying to justify his own bitterness.
And then he reveals his own unhappy past, being abandoned and forgotten, trying to get sympathy, trying to mold her into this audience for his self-pity.
And right from the start, their marriage is just silence. An imposed, suffocating silence.
He insists on it. Even when she tries to embrace him, he receives her coldly. Why? Because in his view, her emotional outbursts are just hysterical.
He sees her defiance growing, refusing the theater, her gaze becoming ironical, but he interprets it all as rebellion and independence, not, a reaction to him.
It's a battle of wills, but played out in this agonizing quiet. And he's utterly convinced that a woman, above all at 16, must be in complete subordination to a man.
He thinks she loved him, or maybe wanted to love. He's always scrambling for justification for his own actions, his villainies.
And the irony is staggering when he calls himself the most generous of men, forced into pawnbroking by society, dreaming of an estate, a beloved wife, helping others.
A total disconnect from the reality he's creating.
Completely.
So the quarrels, as he calls them, they start when she tries to take some initiative in the shop, pricing things differently, even arguing with him.
Yes. And the real turning point is that incident with the captain's widow and the medallion.
Yes. His wife swaps the medallion for a cheaper bracelet.
Which he discovers immediately. And he confronts her very calmly, but with this chilling precision, just reasserting his total ownership, his absolute control over everything.
And this small act of defiance from her, challenging his authority, it just ignites his whole controlling system, makes it worse.
Her reaction is primal, though. She stamps her foot. He describes it as a frenzy of a wild animal.
And his response?
He strips her of her duties in the shop. Total shutdown.
So she retaliates by leaving the house, which breaks their pre-marriage agreement.
Exactly. It escalates. And this leads him to uncover some kind of plot involving his old regiment buddy, Efimovich, and this other woman, Yulia Samsonovna. It just fuels his paranoia.
He then cooks up this plan to eavesdrop on a meeting between his wife and Efimovich, with a loaded revolver in his pocket.
Right. But even before that, she confronts him, asks if it's true he was kicked out of the regiment for cowardice, for refusing a duel, and begged in the streets.
He admits it, his past shame.
and she uses it to humiliate him further, laughing maliciously. It's a direct hit on his deepest insecurities.
So that confrontation with Efimowitsch, what actually happens there?
Well, it's a major turning point, especially in how the narrator understands or misunderstands his wife. Instead of being seduced, she just laughs at Efimowitsch's clumsy advances. Right. Her virtue, as he sees it, shows this holy contempt for vice.
Ah. So he thinks she arranged it out of hatred for him.
Yes, but her inherent purity and sinlessness stopped her from actually going through with anything. That's his interpretation.
He interrupts them, takes her home, in silence, believing he's witnessed her moral victory, which, perversely, he still makes about himself.
Exactly. Back home, she's pale, lips tight. He takes the loaded revolver out, places it on the table between them.
He knows she knew how to use it, right? She'd practiced before.
She had. Then he lies down, pretends to sleep. He's setting the stage for what he sees as the ultimate test, the ultimate power play.
This leads to what he calls a terrible reminiscence. He wakes up.
And she's standing over him, the revolver pointed right at his temple.
Chilling.
He closes his eyes again, pretends he's still asleep. He thinks if she knows he's awake, his apparent readiness to accept death might make her hesitate, make her hand tremble.
He frames it as a fearful duel for life and death. He, the coward of yesterday, has to prove himself now.
It's just this intense psychological manipulation and a profound misreading of what must be going on inside her head.
He feels the cold metal, admits he didn't have much hope.
But then a flicker of hope. He opens his eyes, she's gone. The revolver is back on the table.
And his conclusion.
He believes he has conquered her. Forever.
Wow. And to cement this conquest,
he buys a new iron bedstead. A screen. Physically separating them, solidifying her defeat in his eyes.
And shortly after this, she gets incredibly sick.
Falls gravely ill with brain fever. She's sick for 6 weeks. A clear physical sign of the immense psychological pressure she's under.
During her illness, he spends money on her care, but hides his worry, right? Stifles his concern.
Meticulously. Afterwards, when she recovers, it's back to absolute silence. Just talk about daily routines, nothing personal.
He thinks she's too much shattered, too completely conquered. His plan now is just to let her forget and grow used to it.
He watches her secretly, still nursing this fantasy that one day she'll just come to him all at once of herself, total submission.
He reflects on his past shame, the regiment incident, and thinks this whole revolver episode has somehow canceled out his past failings in her eyes.
Yeah, he thinks now she sees him not as a scoundrel, but maybe just a strange person. And he kind of likes that idea.
He finds pleasure in her humiliation, the inequality between them. He even does random acts of kindness for strangers, hoping she'll hear about it and it'll boost his heroic image.
It's incredibly narcissistic.
Then, about a month before the end, he notices something's changed again. A strange melancholy in her. A cough.
The doctor suggests a trip. Go to the sea for her health.
And she blushes. He thinks it's humility at the time.
But later in his agony, he reinterprets it as shame. Shame that he's still there, still acting like her husband, still part of her life.
And then the moment comes when, as he puts it, the veil suddenly falls.
Yes. One evening in April, he hears her singing. Softly.
And his reaction is intense.
He's overwhelmed by this painful and almost vindictive amazement. He thinks, she is singing, and before me. Has she forgotten about me?
And the horrible realization hits him. She has forgotten him. The silence wasn't submission. It was her moving on, creating her own inner world without him.
Exactly. And this sparks not anger exactly, but this desperate rapture in his soul. He realizes he's completely lost her emotionally.
So he rushes to her, sits down suddenly, grabs her hand.
And just unleashes this torrent of incoherent words. Falls at her feet, kisses them, worships her. Promises Bologna, the sea. Promises to be her dog.
It's this sudden, frantic outpouring of desperate love, a complete reversal of his whole system.
Utterly overwhelming for her. And it's in that state, in that delirium, that she says the most significant thing in the whole story.
I thought you would let me go on like that.
That line. He says it stabbed his heart as though with a knife. It explained everything.
He finally understands. She thought their life would just continue like that, silent, separate, her at her table, him at his, until they were old.
His sudden explosion of love, his need for connection now, it shattered the fragile, silent peace she had somehow constructed for herself. It was a delusion to her.
The next morning, she seems calm, deceptively calm.
He tells him she's a criminal, that her crime had been torturing her all the winter.
Which crime? The revolver.
Probably. It's ambiguous, but that seems most likely. She says she appreciates his generosity, vows to be his faithful wife.
He embraces her, kisses her like a husband for the first time. He thinks he's finally won.
Believes it completely. He leaves for a bit just to finalize the travel plans for Bologna, totally unaware of what's about to happen.
And Luccheri, the servant, fills in the final moments.
Chillingly, 20 minutes before he gets back, she found her mistress praying before the icon, smiling strangely.
10 minutes later, Luccheri checks again.
Sees her by the open window, head in her arm, still smiling. And then she steps forward, presses the icon to her chest, and throws herself out.
A sudden, decisive act.
He returns 5 minutes, only 5 minutes too late. Finds her body, still warm, the icon beside her.
The workman points to a handful of blood. He's just left there, completely lost, touching the blood, yelling, utterly bewildered.
Yeah, utter confusion and incomprehension.
So the rest of the novella is him grappling with that question. Why? Why did this woman die?
He speculates wildly, grasping at straws. Was she scared of his sudden love? Couldn't handle the promises? Was she too chaste, too pure to give him only half love?
Trying desperately to find a reason that maybe makes him less culpable or at least makes sense of it all?
He questions if she respected him or despised him, finally admitting his blindness in thinking she didn't despise him. He wishes she were alive, even if she hated him.
He laments the lost chance. Couldn't we have grown used to each other again?
Fixates on being 5 minutes, only 5 minutes too late. Wishes she'd left a note saying, blame no one. Wonders if it was just an impulse, an irresponsible moment, or even physical illness, anemia, like she just got tired.
Anything but the truth he eventually lands on.
Which is?
His final, brutal realization that cuts through all the self-deception. I worried her to death, that is what it is.
That's the moment. The raw, unvarnished truth hits him.
And then he just rails against everything, laws, customs, morals, this blind, inert force that destroyed her. He imagines this paradise he would have built for her even if she loved someone else.
And he ends with that desolate, universal cry. Men are alone on earth. That is what is dreadful.
Well, the pendulum just keeps ticking. Callously indifferent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. It's just devastating.
This deep dive into gentle spirit, it really does showcase Dostoevsky's absolute mastery of psychological insight, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's such a powerful exploration of pride, miscommunication, and that destructive desire for control.
The narrator's journey through his own fractured memory, it's a masterclass in self-deception and how it blinds us to the suffering we inflict.
It really reminds you how the mind can create these elaborate justifications, but also how it can arrive at sudden, incredibly painful clarity. And the irony, the sheer irony of his noble intentions, his heroic system leading directly to this awful tragedy. It leaves you with so much to think about regarding love, respect, and genuine communication.
We really hope this deep dive has given you a profound understanding of this classic work. If you want to experience the full impact of Dostoevsky's powerful narrative for yourself, be sure to grab a copy of Gentle Spirit. You can find a link in the description.
It's definitely worth the read. Intense, but worth it.
And please don't forget to subscribe to Books and Bytes for more deep dives into the literary world.